As we move through this, I'm going to challenge you to think, as I wrote up here earlier, like a business. Okay? And I'll tell you why, and you can challenge me. I'm going to kind of skip through some of this because based on how much time we had left last time and what I've heard that you've already heard this morning, I'll try to move through it quickly and then get to the part where you can ask me things that you want to know, because I think, again, that may be more relevant, and it's probably, you're not the only one in the room who has these questions. So one of the things that we talk about in social business and social enterprise and in churches is understanding the terminology. It's not that critical anymore in my opinion, but I'm going to try to tell you what I'm talking about, and so to do that, we'll talk a little bit about the terminology. The word that I first came into contact with is this idea social business comes from Muhammad Yunus. Does everybody or anybody know who Muhammad Yunus is? Muhammad Yunus, Y-U-N-U-S, is a Nobel laureate known for basically starting Grameen organizations, which is from Bangladesh and one of the pioneers in microfinance. When I was at Pepperdine, he had just got his Nobel Prize. He came 2008, I believe, and spoke to us there. And that's when I really realized that it was sort of that, where you guys were talking about how do I bring all these things together and be something that encompasses them all. He talked about taking business and making people's lives better with it. And he talks about it in very specific ways, but for me it was my first sort of aha moment. And we'll talk about how he defined social business, which I will take some issue with, but it's important to know that that word has a very specific meaning at times, at least when you're talking in the world of the things we're going to talk about. Social enterprise is what I will refer to often, and I'll define that, but what I really mean by social enterprise is that you have an organization who's framed or created around a purpose, and in my opinion, a for-profit organization, but we'll talk about that too. Conscious capitalism is another word that you hear a lot. I like this word because it identifies capitalism, which we as Americans tend to think is the greatest thing since the Second Coming. Anybody here know what the definition of, what are the three components of capitalism? Or one component of the three? Anybody get it? What is it?
Capital, profit.
It's actually, profit isn't one, but you would think it would be. But anybody else? No. Keep going.
Market. Competition.
Market. Free markets, competition, and one other one. It was actually part of the original...
commerce?
No. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was a phrase that John Locke, I believe, came up with. But when he came up with it, it wasn't the pursuit of happiness. It was life, liberty, and the pursuit of something. Anybody know what it was?
Materialism.
Private property. Another one of the hallmarks of American thought. So capitalism is really free markets, competition, and private ownership. Okay? Nothing in there about greed. Nothing in there about have and have-nots. Nothing in there about tops and bottoms. None of that. Private property, competition, free markets. And so this idea of social enterprise fits really well within that, because it can and does exist in all of those areas. Okay? And then the word that I want to, and again, I'm not trying to step on toes, but this is not social enterprise. Okay? It's not a bad thing, necessarily. How many of you here come from a faith-based background at all? Okay, good. So I can use this reference. Paul's talking, people are coming to Paul and saying, hey, people are talking about how they come in Apollos' name and they come in, so-and-so's name, and they're talking about Christ, but they're claiming to come from all these different people. And he says, look, wait a minute. It doesn't really matter where they're coming from if they're doing what we need them to be doing. Okay? Corporate social responsibility is sort of like that. And that was a terrible paraphrase, but I'm trying to make a point. As the professor, I get to do that. We don't always care why people are doing good things as long as they're doing good things. But oftentimes, corporate social responsibility is sort of viewed as whitewashing, right? Yes, we destroy the environment, but we give money to children's schools. Okay? Some people would call it greenwashing. There's all these different ideas, but social enterprise is not, at least in the end, corporate social responsibility. And that would be something that if you talk to Muhammad Yunus about, he would tell you, absolutely no. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly pull these up. It's not as important to know what Yunus's principles are, but just to know that he's very specific about what makes up a social business. And some of them are that they must be financially sustainable, which I'd agree with. Anybody who invests doesn't get anything back but what they originally invested. There's no return on your money if you invest in it. Profit stays in the company, environmentally conscious. You get a market wage for better working conditions. Do it with joy. Be excited about what you're doing. But that every social business has to be focused on overcoming poverty or some other poverty-related problem. And I would say, in my definition, that's not necessarily the case. So, I only have 4 principles because I like to keep things simple. But this is sort of an idea for you so we can kind of be on the same playing field. I believe that a social enterprise needs to be for-profit. That doesn't mean that you can't have a nonprofit that supports social enterprises, that you can't launch social enterprises, that you can't invest in social enterprises. But if we want to talk about the definition that I'm referring to, okay, not that you can't do good things and be a nonprofit. The definition that I'm referring to will be a for-profit organization. And it's for this reason right here, financial sustainability. Okay? The nice thing about business is you have to create something of enough value that people are willing to spend their discernible income on. And you have to do it in a way that people feel like they're getting more in return than what they're paying for. And you also have to be sustainable enough that what they're giving you covers all your costs. And it maybe makes a profit that you can reinvest. That is a sustainable model. That's all I'm going to say about that. So number 1, for-profit. Number 2, for people. I have a broader vision and definition of social enterprise than maybe Yunus would of social business, which is the purpose of your organization, to make the world a better place. I don't care what you think makes the world a better place. You might think comfortable shoes makes the world a better place. But is that the purpose? Okay? Profit, number 1, is necessary in a social enterprise. But as we say in law school, it's not sufficient. Okay? If the only reason you exist is for profit, you will make different decisions than if you exist for a purpose. And we've seen in the not too distant past people who existed for profit, who made decisions based on that, who damaged a lot of people's lives. Okay? When I was in law school, I had a gentleman who was the CFO of homestore.com come in and talk to us. And he said in 30 seconds he lost his entire career in a 30-second conversation. Because what they came up with at homestore.com was, what was the most important thing to show, to demonstrate in the .com boom? Anybody know? If you wanted people to invest in your organization, what did you need to show?
Rapid growth.
Rapid growth, which correlates to what?
Solutions.
Easy.
Money.
You needed to demonstrate you had a lot of revenue. They didn't even care if you were making a profit. You just had to have a lot of revenue. And so what they decided to do was create sort of this revenue-generating thing. It just happened to be totally unethical, which was, we will buy from this specific vendor that we own, who will sell and buy from this vendor, who will sell and buy from this vendor, who will sell and buy for us. So basically, we'll put $5 out into the system. That $5 will come right back through all these shell companies that we've created, and that will look like we are generating incredible amounts of revenue. And he said the CEO came up to him and basically just said, here's this model we're thinking about sort of in a hallway conversation. What do you think? And he said, yeah, that makes sense. Claimed, that's all he said. And then when the SEC came and did some investigations, only you got the IRS investigating you and you've got Sarbanes-Oxley. Like those two things, if those people ever come after you, if you're ever being prosecuted for one of those, turn over on your back, put your belly up, and just let them take whatever they want. But that entity, that organization, was basically found guilty of committing fraud, and he was found guilty of being a party to it in what he claims, again, was about a 30-second conversation. And in doing that, because they were so focused on profit, because profit was the most important thing to them, as the CFO, if you go to jail for violating Sarbanes-Oxley and you spend your whole life being a CPA, how many more jobs as a CPA or a CFO do you think you'll get? Zero. answer is no. He was like 35 at the time, had 3 kids, went to jail. I think he was going for 10 years. In fact, the reason he was talking to our ethics class about it was to try to get a better sentence. But good guy, smart guy, focused on the wrong thing, and lost a career over it. So, for purpose, profit is important, but you've got to be about something else. You've got to be about making the world a better place and for people. For the planet, I think that Eunice is right. If we are a good company, we're not out there destroying what I would consider this gift that we have of this planet. And so, for profit, for people, for the planet, for better. A social enterprise should be a great place to work. It should be the kind of place that you come to because you have a passion for what is happening there. It should be the kind of place where you get compensated adequately for the work that you're doing. It should be the kind of place that you are proud to tell people that you worked at, that people want to be, that is on those lists of the 100 greatest places. That's what your organization should be. When we go to work often, I will just tell you, when I used to, as a intern for Pepperdine University, when I was going to law school there, I worked in their campus planning department because I had a background in construction. And thought about getting a job there even after school. We talked about money, right? Does anybody care about how much they get paid at their job? Okay, one person's being honest in the room. As you might imagine, being a nonprofit and being a Christian university, their pay was not market pay. But there was a really good reason that it wasn't market pay. Does anybody here know what it was? What's that?
They didn't need to have it be that way.
Why didn't they need to have it be that way?
People want to work there. They're fighting for those jobs.
Because, yes, but because it was about the mission. This job is about the mission. Now, when you hear in an employment interview, our pay is based on the fact that this job is a mission. What do you know? Not going to be enough pay. Period. I don't care what the mission is. If you live in Malibu and you're making $70,000 a year, you're not making enough money. Okay? But because it's a good thing, it's okay if we pay you less. And I'm here to say today, as a former pastor, as a Christian man, as a person who works for a nonprofit, that's not true. We should be, if we're a social enterprise, making money, doing good things, and rewarding people for it. There's no reason that you can't be a viable business who pays people really well. Even Muhammad Yunus, who has this sort of altruistic idea of what a social business would be, says you need to pay people well. Because you want the best people working for you. And passion should be why they're there. And that should be what's driving them on. You should be rewarding them. And of course, in any startup, you can't always do that right up front. And there's other ways to do that with responsibility and opportunity and development. You need to be creative. But at some point, your goal should not be to pay them based on whether or not this is a mission. I don't find that in Scripture anymore. That's sort of my go-to. All right, so those are my principles. So what about churches and nonprofits? And after this, what I was going to show you is a video that our church did. Well, actually, Randy did it at Neighborhood, where they talked to me about Maria and the work we do with our Empower Fund. Did everybody see that this morning, the Empower Fund video? Did anybody see the Empower Fund video? Okay, so basically, I'll tell it to you quickly and to save time. One of our pastors there, Stephanie, she likes to eat Mexican food. She goes to this Mexican restaurant all the time in her community.
Oh, yes.
She lives in contact. Okay, you got all that? We helped Maria. It was a no-brainer to me. She was being basically put in a situation where someone was taking advantage of her against what the law says. It's really nice when you're an attorney. You can write cool letters and put these numbers and names on it and send it out, and people tend to listen to you. This gentleman listened when I wrote the letter. But basically, she wasn't being treated properly. And she had talents and she had skills, but she didn't have the money and she didn't have the access. And so we set up this fund to help launch her as an enterprise. Okay? I would say that Empower Fund is not a social enterprise. It's a microfinance fund that we have at our church. The purpose of which, though, is to help people launch good businesses in the community. And possibly social enterprises, hopefully social enterprises, as they go out and do good things and hire other people and give people a job. I saw a TED Talk one time where a woman said, isn't giving someone a job who needs it enough of a social enterprise? And I would say, yes, it is. But churches and nonprofits have the opportunity to do a lot of these things that maybe other businesses can't do, like helping launch businesses. And there's a number in this room, I'm sure, and there are always people, churches that call me and say, hey, we want to start a social enterprise. And I always say to them, great, are you going to start a parachurch organization? Are you going to launch an independent, for-profit business? And they struggle with that. You don't have to do it my way. But what I will tell you is, where we can come in as churches and nonprofits is to support these ideas and launch people on their path, or create educational pieces or incubators or things like that. But I really think to be viable as a social enterprise, you need to separate yourself from that, what was the word that you used?
Job security.
Thank you. From this idea, it's better when it comes from other people. From this idea that it has to be funded through donations and grants and people giving us their money. I can talk more about that, but I'm a big believer in that. And I think there's a place in the world for us as churches and nonprofits. But I don't necessarily think that the best use of our skills always is going to be to be starting ourselves a social enterprise. So here's a few examples. Some you know, some you don't know. I have Empower on here, but I would say this isn't what I would call a social enterprise. I would say that it's set up to help launch social enterprises. Because what does every startup company need, even if you're for-profit? Money. They need that. And if in your organization you can start a group like we did, that sort of has this seed money set aside for people that we believe are going to be successful and that need that access and need that funding, do it. Please do it. Simplicity is an organization that some of my students are working on, so is Beyond Family. Simplicity is really just an organization that's set up to, what they're trying to do is help people eat better and connect to local food sources because they think that's important. I think it's super important as a farmer myself. And so what they're doing is they're going to go and create relationships with local farms and even in the farmers markets, and develop recipes that are based on those products and inputs, and then sell that as a package. I go to the farmer's market almost every Saturday. I probably spend $40 there. I bring all this produce home that seems like a great idea, and then I don't know what to do with it. So I eat the fruit, and maybe I'll make the Brussels sprouts, or I'll drink the milk, but a lot of it goes to waste. And so what they're trying to do is say, hey, side note, right now in this country, we watch more shows about cooking than we cook. Okay? Everybody wants to be a chef. Nobody wants to take the time to do it. So their little tagline is chef not included. They're going to give you the product, the food. They're going to tell you what to do. They're even going to put videos online to show you how to do it so that you can feel like you're being creative and that you're doing good things for your family and that you're cooking home meals, all of which are, in my opinion, extremely culturally important. That's a social enterprise, you guys. They're not feeding the poor, although they have some ideas on the back end about helping food kitchens and things like that they do want to do. But they exist for a purpose that is not just about poverty. But I think it's a great one. And I think that's an awesome idea. So I just wanted to kind of put this out there. Tom's Shoes, we all know Tom's 1-for-1, buy a shoe and give a shoe. Easy model. Zappos. When Tony Shea started the online shoe company, Zappos, he said, I want to provide the best customer service possible. He didn't care what they sold. Shoes happened to be what they ended up selling. But if you read the book, Delivering Happiness, he'll tell you, I didn't care about that. I just wanted to have the best customer service relationship possible. And he has great stories about that. In my opinion, social enterprise. Does Zappos make a lot of money? Yeah. They're building a city in the back, right? Based on their culture. They make tons of money. But that they exist. Because what happens is, if you don't exist for that purpose, anybody here read Drive by Dan Pink? Read. Okay, great book. You can watch a short video if you go to RSA Dan Pink Drive on YouTube. And he'll tell you, when the purpose and profit motives become unmoored, disconnected, bad things happen. So it's got to be about this purpose. And it doesn't matter if it's not poverty, as long as the purpose is to make the world a better place, to help your community. In my opinion, you're meeting a social enterprise standard. Here's my how-to. It's not charity. Muhammad Yunus says there's no dignity in charity. I think that's really important for us to remember. It doesn't mean there's no need for it. It doesn't mean there aren't times when people have lost their house or are hungry or need a place to sleep, and charity is the right thing. Okay? Teaching somebody, as I said in the earlier session, if your house burns down, having someone come in and say, what you really need to do is start a social enterprise, doesn't help. Having them find you a place to stay and clothes and food helps. But in the long run, social enterprises are not about charity. Okay? They're about freedom. They're about helping people use their gifts and talents. They're about connecting them to enterprising opportunities, business. Okay? Find your passion or a problem that you're passionate about and create an enterprise solution, which to me means creating a product or service of value that you can sell for more than it costs you, that people want to buy. I would also say, and again, this is something I'm really passionate about, lean entrepreneurship. It's not business as usual. Okay? Start small. Start with the money that you have. Figure out what it is that you really exist for, and then decide. This is what I tell my students in the entrepreneurship class. I say, look, tell me what you want to do. And they start all these big ideas and great ideas, and they come up with this business plans, and then I said, okay, how would you do that by Saturday? Because if you think about what you could do by Saturday, you'll know what your core purpose is. What does that really look like if you had to launch it by Saturday? What could you do to meet your purpose? Lean entrepreneurship, there's some great conferences out there. There's some great books. Lean Startup is one of them. One of the habits we get into in a business school is to think about IBMs and Microsofts and Walmarts of the world and forget that those make up like less than 2% of all organizations out there. I went to a conference with the MBA students. I took them to Harvard this year for a social enterprise conference there. And we went to a funding workshop. And the statistic there was, how many organizations do you think get venture capital funding as startups? What do you think the percentage is? 2%. Yeah, it's like 2%. So 98% of all startups have to figure out how to get money somewhere. My charge to my students is start small. If you're creating a service, do it for your family. See what they think about that service. Get feedback. Iterate. Do it for more people. Get feedback. Iterate. That's the idea of lean entrepreneurship. It's about saying, how do we launch in the marketplace? How do we get something off the ground? How do we access our social networks so that we can just start putting products out there? We can ship, as Seth Godin would say. We can ship products and then get feedback and then change and ship again, and then get feedback and ship again. You want to have a plan. There's nothing wrong with having a plan. But if when you graduate from the MBA program at Fresno Pacific and what you've done is written a 60-page plan that you will never launch because it's not even reasonable for you to do it, and then you call that good, we haven't helped you. If you've written a 25-page plan that talks about what you can actually do to start tomorrow, and in writing that plan you've actually tried to start tomorrow, and you've been doing this already, then we've done something that's worth value. Okay? Lean entrepreneurship, great concepts coming out of Harvard Business School and FPU. So take a look at that. It's not, social enterprise is not business as usual. Find and hire the best people, pay them well. I've said enough about that. Okay. I rushed through that, but I just wanted to sort of set the table, as we say at church, and put some things out there for you to think about and maybe spark, or at least give you a little bit of ground to talk about. But now ask me, what do you want to know? What are you thinking about? What didn't you like about what I said? What resonates with you? Challenge me.
I'm going to start out by agreeing with you. One of the first slides
I always like that.
was the idea that investors get no return. And that didn't sit well with me. I like that you didn't include that in your list.
Yeah.
To be sustainable and profitable, you should be willing to share the profit in many different ways. And to investors seems like a reasonable place to share.
Yes, and I would say yes, but would be my response to that. I thought about putting that one in. One of the reasons that Yunus says that, and unfortunately tends to play out, is that when you get investors who aren't connected to the purpose, full circle, right? That's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't have that fit, then
that's right. Because we have seen social enterprises, especially microfinance one, where they start to see. Anybody here work at a bank or have worked at a bank? Would you imagine that typical repayment of loans in America is 98%? No. been through the mortgage crisis, you know that's not the case, okay? But in social and microfinance situations, they tend to be in the high 90s. What bank wouldn't want that? And so we've seen examples where banks have sort of taken over these microfinance to very, very bad ends. Because, like with us, when we're working with Maria or people like Maria and she hits a bump in the road and can't make a payment, do we then initiate all the clauses in the contract that say we can collect the full amount due and payable now? Acceleration clauses? Do you think we do that?
No.
No. But we do things to help her so that she can make that next payment should those issues come up. And that's why they're successful. Because they're flexible, because they're small, because they know the people. So yes, I don't like his idea that you can't get your money back plus some, something worth it for you. But I would say those investors need to be connected to the purpose.
My question is a little half-baked. So here we are.
My presentation's half-baked.
Well, no, your presentation's pretty solid. Matter of fact, I remember I saw you last year, so I get credit for 2 times?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, okay, so here we are with the for-profit sector, the nonprofit sector, and the social sector. So we're talking to churches about starting and really relearning, completely reprogramming in some ways. When your church did that, I mean, was it a culture clash, strange, what happened to Maria, why does it have to do with us? And then financially, how did that happen? How does a church go from a budget to a micro loan to someone who's down the street?
There's a lot of ways to answer that question. I'll try to answer it as candidly as possible.
Please.
I think the people at Neighborhood Church are there because they want to be there and because they believe what we're doing. And the people who aren't there anymore. And that happened in our church.
Oh, wow.
So, as a former pastor, one thing that I have often said, even in my church, was the dean actually of the business school, a few deans back, said to me one time, "You have like 3 churches at least within your congregation, probably."
Yeah.
And if you're not speaking to all of them in relevant ways, then it may look like unity, but that's not really what you have going on there. Neighborhood, unfortunately or fortunately, has gone through some of those struggles, and so I think part of it is those who are there are all in, which is not a knock on those who aren't, because in my opinion, in any organization, church or otherwise, if you're not all in, then you shouldn't be there. And that's okay. Like, the kingdom is plenty big enough, right, for us all to find our right fit. And I talk a lot in business about one of the most important things you can do in business is hiring the right people. And then the second, or maybe even first most important thing, is firing the right people. We can't fire people in churches, but sometimes they make those choices. So part of it is that we have the right people at the congregation. I wish I had the story for you about how it was a major culture change and we educated them and all that. What really happened was Steve, our lead pastor, said to me, "Will you and Steph come up and talk about Maria?" And then just ask. I never have a problem talking or asking. Stephanie and I got up, he interviewed us, I told them the story of Maria, basically that her landlord was not following the law and was sort of oppressing her, and we're looking for ways, and that's when I used this phrase, what we're trying to do here with this idea of the Empower Fund is not about charity, it's about freedom. It's about releasing people from oppression, if that be the case. And we wanted to raise $3,000 to help her do that. That's what she needed at that time. And that was one Sunday, and I found out on Monday we raised $10,000. So, call that a God thing, call that people who are in tune to the purpose. We're invested in this organization because we believe in it. Call that a emotional pitch. I don't know. But the interesting thing was they dove in, I didn't tell them how much we needed, I just said, we need money, and they blew away our expectations. So, yeah, I don't have the answer.
Representing the idea that, and I know away from social enterprises,
that's okay, that's okay.
But the idea of impacting and leveraging the spiritual and material blessings of the church, which are enormous.
Sure.
I had one guy that I was showing an issue to, and he has $400,000 in the missions budget at his disposal.
Yeah.
In one church in Fresno has $400,000 in the mission budget at their disposal. So People's Church is an example, or any other church. How would they integrate this concept in saying, hey, maybe it's a microloan, maybe it's an empowerment, maybe it's a freedom, and then where would that have to express itself? I mean, you guys kind of did that.
Here's something I would say to you, and I said this earlier, and I think it's really important, is there's a couple of things. One, we don't all have to do what everybody else is doing.
Right.
we have to do is what we're good at doing, and help others to find places that are good at doing the things that they're interested in. We happen to have at our congregation someone like me who's an attorney, who's been in business most of their adult life, who's educated in that. We have people who run small businesses. These are the people that made up the board to make these decisions. It wasn't pastors.
So it's integrated.
No offense,
Okay.
right? One of the things I see in these situations is we have business people trying to do mission work without bringing mission people in, and mission people at churches trying to do business without tapping into the business resources, and neither one of them are a good idea. So what I would say is go with your strengths. Who's in your church? What are their gifts and talents? Don't be afraid as a pastor to call on them to lead these things. And vice versa. If you're a business person and you have a lot of money and you want to do some really cool, exciting, enterprising things, bring some mission people in to sort of tell you what that's like. Because one of the things we ran into even with Maria is we want to tell her story because it's exciting, but how do we do that and be faithful to her? Without saying like, here's this poor person, here's this poor, under-resourced, undereducated, not that these things are true, but I'm just saying, poor person, that we brought in and gave all this money to, and we just want to tell you guys what a blessing God has been, right? Right. That's not the right thing. As business people, we want to promote things, but as mission people, sometimes we know that's not the way that you do it. So it's a collaborative thing. That's why for me, when I heard Eunice talk about this, I was like on fire because it was the way in which I thought I could bring sort of my faith-based background and the talents that I think I've been given to do something that no one ever told me I could do before. Because if I was going to do good work, I had to do it as a nonprofit, right? Or if I was going to make money, then I had to do it as a for-profit. But there was no such thing as making money and doing good. It's just there's no paradigm for that. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Find best people and pay them well, and just when you, I'll give you sort of why I'm asking you.
Yes.
You start a social enterprise.
Yes.
Okay, April sort of heads up one part of a lot of the ministries within a thrift store. You sometimes don't hire the best people because it is a pathway to to a job.
Okay.
So maybe they're the best people for your goal, definitely not the best people for actually performing that job. And basically, pay them well is, I believe you have to pay them, but I see in a lot of things, one of my partners is the chairman of another board that has a thrift store. Yeah. And he sees people don't want to leave, but the goal of your thrift store is bring them in, train them, and then move them out. Yeah. And I'm not saying you treat them badly.
You're not trying to encourage them with low wages and bad work environment.
Well, that's what I mean is that you have to, what you're doing is you're preparing for what's in the real world. Sure. And it's not always the best treatment, and in a sense you want them to leave, or your mission is gone.
Yeah, if you make your kids too comfortable, they don't move out.
They don't move out, exactly.
So a couple things there. One is part of your purpose is to train people in how to be good employees. Okay, so where I would say hire the best people may be the executive staff you have working over those people, right? Because I could start a table sales company that only sells tables, minimum price $25,000, build the best handcrafted table, sell those all day long to affluent people. Have I accomplished a purpose? Maybe I have, because I want to be a craftsman, but then I may also be taking that money and investing into your thrift shop, because my real purpose is to help people get jobs. So what I'm saying is you have to kind of define your purpose, and your purpose is actually that piece which is employing people. So that's a little bit different. But what I would say to you is get the best people you can to help set up, oversee, manage, and pay them, so that they want to keep helping people, which is your purpose. Does that make sense?
Oh no, I agree with that totally.
Yeah, and so I think that's it. And yeah, we don't want our adult children living at home. I get it, and I think that you have a unique situation because your end piece is what's happening for your enterprise. That's it. That is the spot where your purpose is happening. Is in the thrift shop enterprise that you operate, right? That's where the training is happening.
That
That's
is
where
where-
the work to better work is going on.
Right.
Yeah. So it's you have to look at each organization individually to kind of define that. Anybody else?
Wouldn't it be good if you had someone to counsel with them, saying that your tenure is pretty much up? You need to figure out what you want to do. Can we help you find employment?
Well, part of developing people, I would say, is to try to identify what their goals are. Try to find out where do they want to be. When I do employee evaluations, which I think is a very difficult thing, more than half the time done wrong, and can be really detrimental to the employer-employee relationship. That's my HR side. What I try to do is find out what is it people are looking for. Where are they trying to get? What is it that they want to be 5 or 10 years from now? And what can I do within my organization to help them achieve that? And so in this situation we're talking about, part of it could be that, and developing the skills with them while they're working in the thrift store necessary to achieve where they really want to go. When I ran this, I'll give you just a quick example, this little preschool, where we were not able to offer people sort of career opportunities unless they were just a second income. Almost every one of the teachers who came through wanted to be a credentialed teacher. And many people would say, well, why would you want them? They're just going to leave. And I would say those are exactly the people we want, because those are the people who are motivated, and we're going to milk them while they're here, and we're going to help them get curriculum training, we're going to help them get classroom management training, we're going to help them, because the worst thing we could have is somebody who's not motivated at all working here for the next 20 years.
And then that gives them a spot to fill with people who are in need.
Exactly.
And he's clogged.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're absolutely clogged up.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is that so hard for churches?
Which one?
Evaluating people, helping them to ask questions like, where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? Or
I don't think asking questions
I think
like
it's
is
exceptionally.
hard.
I've
I'll
worked
tell you
not in
what's
churches
hard.
at all, and now I work in a church, and it's like for
I'll
some
tell you-
reason it's like people don't know how to do
Anybody
that.
here know who Jeffrey Canada is? Harlem Children's Zone?
Yeah.
So when they interviewed him at this summit, Willow Summit? Willow Creek
Global
thing.
leadership.
When they interviewed him, and he's been sort of this guy I read about and sort of get some mentorship ideas from, he runs a huge nonprofit that's been very successful. But one of the things they asked him was like, what's one of the most difficult things you've learned as running it? And he said that not everybody is redeemable. He said, I should have fired people sooner. Here's a Christian guy in a leadership position, running a nonprofit. His biggest takeaway was, I should have fired people sooner. Because what we think is that when we fire somebody, we're harming them.
Right.
And what I would say is it's how you do it. Because keeping people in a position where they're not successful longer than they should be is not doing them any favors. They know. What would be doing them a favor is to say, look, this isn't working. This is how I counsel people. This isn't working out for us. It's not a good fit. But we believe you have some skills and some talents, and here's what we see they are. We don't have a place for that. But what we're going to do is help you find a place. So for the next 2 weeks, I don't know if nobody was here. I did an HR talk here not that long ago for the Risk Management Association that looked at how much does it cost you to have the wrong person working for you for 2 years, 2.5 years, at $65,000. How much do you think it was? It was mid-level management, not a ton of money, right? 65 grand, good money, but not a ton. Working for you for 2.5 years in the wrong place, essentially. This was a study done by Career Builder. How much do you think that cost the organization?
It's 5 times.
$800,000.
Oh my God.
So if you're going to tell me that you can't afford to pay them for 2 weeks while they find another place to go work, you're kidding yourself. But we think that everybody is redeemable, and they are in one sense, but maybe not in the employment sense, and maybe not in this place. And so that's my short answer to your short question.
Heibels had an interesting answer at that same seminar. He said because in the church community within employment, it's one of the hardest places for us to tell the truth. No kidding. It's just hard to be candid inside of a Christian environment.
I will tell you that our official time is up, but I have a few minutes if anybody wants to stay and talk or ask questions.